Good evening, Galleon. This is Tom O'Leary, Mayor of City of Galleon, back here for another Monday night discussion about Galleon and you know, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I think a lot of people over the last 4 or 5 months during the COVID crisis, you feel like you're on a treadmill, or like that movie Groundhog Day. It just seems like the same thing over and over. Certainly at City Hall and trying to keep this small city government operation going, there's an amount of routine, same thing every day. But one of my concerns as we look forward and try to envision Galleon after this COVID crisis and all the impacts that have resulted from it is how do we regain the momentum that I think we established in a lot of ways until over the last few months? In fact, we got into a deep discussion about this. I feel like city government, the community, has kind of taken a pause in terms of its forward movement since we were released from fiscal emergency. I can certainly imagine and believe for a year or so the kind of steady as you go approach, but increasingly it feels as though we're accepting how things are as the way the things need to be in the future. And so tonight I want to talk about something that will hasn't in the planning stage hasn't been as quiet or dormant as maybe some of the other activities or a lot of people around town may think, and that's the development, moving into a decision to build or no build in the long discussed Freeze Athletic Center. So tomorrow night, glad to see that the Airport Economic Development Committee Chairman, Dr. Tom Fellner, had placed on the agenda a discussion about the Freeze Center. And while I'm not sure exactly where that discussion goes, I think it's important for anyone who watches these live streams or stays in touch with city affairs through the internet and various social media that you try to make make some time to view that committee meeting tomorrow at 7 o'clock. I want to touch on a few items about the Freeze Center and where I believe it's at, and really what the types of decisions that need to be made over the next several months might look like. I think there's general consensus around the outside dimensions of the facility, and while it doesn't please everyone, I think largely the soccer and turf type facilities on one side of the overall building and basketball and volleyball largely on the other side, then accompanied by a walking track around the inside perimeter, is really what the overall footprint or uses that I think there's general agreement on. And I think some of us who are looking at how we pay for this, how we fund it over the short run, and then make a long-term financing commitment to this kind of big project, are anxious to see what the latest estimated cost is. But my guess is that the cost of this facility, around which there's I think a pretty strong consensus, it's the right size, it's the right use, will be somewhere between 6 and 7 million. That's a large number. It's a large number for any facility in a town such as Galleon. I think for some people it strikes them as especially large figure for something that's largely an athletic, recreation, health and fitness facility. So think of it as between 6 and 7 million and around 60,000, give or take, square feet. As I said, with soccer fields, turf type activities on one side, basketball, volleyball on the other. I think where the options, where there may be a lack of consensus at this point, is around how we're going to fund it, how it would be paid for. And so my hope is that tomorrow night that there'll be some discussion about those alternatives. And as I've looked at it over the many months, and in fact many years, it's a couple of interesting, maybe ironic things about it. There are four options really. And the first one I'm not really in favor of, and that's a no-build option. I have been and continue to believe we need to build something like that's been proposed, and I think there's a way to afford it, to fund it, if we can reach that consensus. However, I think it's important to note that some of the ideas that are being discussed have different implication for the long-term viability, the long-term size of the Freeze endowment. So I want to just take a second or two and talk about what may be some of the alternatives that are up for discussion. And in no particular order, there is an option that would suggest reducing the approximate $10 million of the fund by, let's say, 50%. So in other words, having a partial liquidation of say $5 million, and then the balance of the construction funds. There are I think legitimate and solid plans to raise that additional money. But largely in that option, there would be very limited amount of financing for this facility. And so there's some, what I would consider negative implications for what that does, or negative impacts rather, for what that does to the earning power, and therefore for the other uses that the Freeze Foundation funds have been put toward over the past 10, 15 years. I think namely what I'm talking about is the impact on the scholarship aspect of it. So I think that's one thing, without getting into a bone grinding, I'm going to turn this thing off detail. That's one option to look at. Partial liquidation, and then raising the balance of the funds through other sources, some of which have already been raised. Some of the other options that really involve financing would be something as straightforward as the Port Authority issuing the debt for the construction cost, and then the city guaranteeing the payment of that debt, probably most likely through a commitment of the proceeds from the annual earnings off of the Freeze Foundation. And among the reasons that some people who've looked at this closely have shied away from that is what's considered a relatively large interest cost and a long-term payment back on the debt that would be incurred. It is likely that under that general scenario that the debt could be between 20 and 30 years. And one of the obvious concerns about that is that it's a long time to commit the city to guarantee the debt that would be issued by the Port Authority. You know, at 64, I don't know, 20, 30 years seems like forever, probably will be. So that's another option, another way of looking at how to do that. And I think under that option, that debt would be sold to various financial institutions or people interested in investing and earning some money off of what would most likely be a tax-free municipal type bond. Another option, and then I'll sort of wind down on this, is one that involves a bit of a combination of that. It does not liquidate any of the fund, but it asks the Freeze Trust, the Freeze Foundation Board, to instruct the financial advisor that they have that invests all the funds, roughly $10 million right now, to purchase some of the debt that the Port Authority would be issuing. So in that way, you could get a favorable interest rate, presumably, and the Freeze Foundation would be significantly committed. They own part of the debt, they'd own part of the building, but it would not result in drawing down the overall endowment and reducing the amount of income that would be generated annually. And then the balance of the money that would be raised, I would propose going to local financial institutions and trying to get them to invest several $100,000. Perhaps some of the larger institutions, could purchase $500,000 or a few $100,000, and in that way raise the balance of the funds that you would not enjoy the foundation purchasing that debt. So it would be a combination of foundation-backed bonds issued by the port, guaranteed by the city, and purchased by the purchased by the Freeze Foundation, and then debt issued into the community, much like the debt that's annually issued by the city for short-term debt and financing other projects. So what I want to do is just stop at that point without getting into too much detail, but saying that there are several options that need to be looked at, and I think that it's important as a community, for people to look at the best use of the Freeze Foundation funds and make sure that we protect the fund, protect the scholarships that are supported by the fund, and as well as think big, dream big, and execute on a major project for the community. So I encourage you to ask some questions tonight, tune in tomorrow, but I really expect that this topic, which has been long discussed, will come to a point where the city is going to work closely with the foundation and the Port Authority to make this happen, or we should perhaps move on to other big projects. So that's all I want to say about that. I want to bridge to something else, and I think that, and it comes about from being out in the community and talking to people. Because I haven't talked about much the last several weeks, maybe the last couple of months, about a grocery store in these Monday night conversations, doesn't mean that I've stopped working on it, nor that I've all of a sudden concluded it's not a top priority. In fact, there are a number of people in the community that have said to me that I can't believe you're going to build this project, the Freeze Center, and Galion still doesn't have a grocery store. And that's a pretty persuasive argument, especially when it comes from people in the community that have always lived here, that work here, that pay taxes. They're I won't say typical, because I don't mean it in a negative way, but they're your average Galionite. And they approach me with those questions. I think they're good questions. And I think the best answer to separate the two projects, the Freeze Center, which would be funded largely with the Freeze Foundation funds that are designated for park and recreation, and other sources of income that the city needs to put together in order to make it possible to encourage a new grocery operator, and I think, quite honestly, in a new building in Galion, to come to Galion and to operate. There is something incomplete about this community when it lacks choices and something that many folks would consider as a new and modern grocery facility. I still hope I'm welcome at Drug Mart and out at Save a Lot and other places that people shop. I'll have to wear a mask and go in there incognito. And my point isn't that they haven't done a great job, but the point is Galion needs a real grocery store, another real grocery store. And so I'm very much in agreement with those people in the community that say you're going to build a large athletic facility for people in the community, but certainly designed for people all over northern Ohio. And if some night a team's in town from out of town and they need Gatorade for the next day, we're actually going to tell them to go to Ontario to buy Gatorade because we don't have a place that's open. It's kind of unacceptable. And so I want people to think of how we can accomplish both those things. And I also want people to remember that how we'll fund the grocery store is a different formula. It's a different use of private capital, and I'll be honest, I think some public money. It's a different equation. It's a different puzzle to solve than using freeze funds on athletic facilities and scholarships. So I guess I'll stop there at that point. I think it's important, if you're at all intrigued by the conversation or have been following over the last several years, then tune in tomorrow night. And I think we're ever evolving and trying to get members of the public so that they can ask questions and participate in this Zoom format. So sometimes it seems to me a little bit like a food fight, but I'd rather have a lot of discussion about this topic than to have anyone believe or conclude that folks had their mind up and it was going to be one certain way no matter what was said, because it's really not. It's just not the status of the project. It's also not the status of Galion moving forward. So there's other things I'd like to talk about. There are other big issues going on in Galion than just the need for a grocery, the need for to make some decisions about the Freeze Center. There's certainly the sleep-in that's closed now, and any activity that the city can do to encourage new ownership out there. And then there's the other hotel, which doesn't get much attention, but the old Ritchie House, the old Central Hotel, that apartment complex on the square, is now the city of Gallions, and we're working through change in ownership and sort of define how that operation's going forward. So that doesn't get much attention. Heck, I talk more about the bike path than the hotel uptown, but that's another major economic development and housing activity that's out there. So anyways, to conclude and to go to questions, we cannot allow us to get trapped in sort of paralyzed by COVID, by worrying about the national issues. Of course you want to keep an eye on them, but I think it's very important for Galion to look right over the horizon, do some planning so as this pandemic subsides, as people continue to do the right things locally, that we're positioned to move forward as soon as we can, rather than wasting this time worrying about things instead of planning for the post-COVID future. So that's all I've got, and there's a whole lot more, and I bet questions will get at some other items that are on people's minds. So, all right, thanks for listening. Let's go to questions.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. First question tonight comes from Tina. She asked, when the Sleep-In Hotel closed, how far behind were they on their utilities?
I don't have that off the top of my head, but we do know that, and I think, Tina, several tens of thousands. I bet I'll get a text from somebody who watches this or listens to this that knows the answer. So if you're going to text, my phone's off, but Matt's on, so you could give Matt the answer, and I'll act like I all of a sudden remembered it. But yeah, they were a couple months behind.
Okay, switching back to the Freeze Center, Dawn asked, when will Gary Frankhouse be on to share his views on the project?
Oh, Dawn, he can get his own show. No. I don't know. I think what I expect tomorrow night is that someone from the Port Authority will be on. I would say if there's much difference in his views and my views, they're shades of the same color in that Crayola box, if you'll accept that old analogy. And I think it probably has to do, any differences have to do with how the project will be financed and paid for. So I think Gary and the Port Authority members will, I'd be real surprised if they don't participate tomorrow night's committee meeting. My hope is they do, and I bet you that's what Doc Fellner is hoping to kind of get that discussion going. But yeah, we could have him on. I don't have any opposition to doing it, and I think you know, when you're working on a project like that, there's always, it's like co-writing a song or co-writing a book or putting anything together. There's some people who have been at the table since the start, and Gary's one of them, and the City of Gallion's been represented throughout, and I think one thing that's become clear, and I'll go to the next question after this, is that this is increasingly becoming a Gallion, although there'll be people all around Crawford County. I know this is heresy to say this, but this is going to be a Gallion project. It's going to be financed largely with Gallion resources, and initially much of the investment will be Gallion area investment. Now I think once it's completed and there's programming that is of interest, you'll see people from all over north central Ohio. And then on the weekends, you'll have a few major tournaments. I think the key is to make sure that we have enough of the restaurant and hotel amenities to have that kind of economic benefit that would result from it captured by people in the Gallion area, and not simply beneficiaries to the Ontario regional complex. We lose a lot of commercial activity to Ontario anyways, which is a different subject. I'm guilty of being, if you catch me at Myers, don't call me a hypocrite, just say I'm in desire of a grocery store too, so. All right, we got more stuff, I'm sure.
Yep. Sounds like Powers Reservoir is in need of some mowing again, man.
Yeah, I was just out there the other day. I don't know I would encourage that person. I don't know. I guess I disagree with it. It looked like it was mowed and they did a pretty good job. The center part of it is going to be a little bit longer, but I thought that the top rim and the bottom of it, and so I'm not sure if it's aesthetics. We maybe disagree about that. If it's some sort of safety issue that they're concerned about, the questioner can follow up, or he can get a hold of us. People don't come up here enough with those kind of questions or with concerns, so it's kind of hard to, I don't have a one-way or a back and forth debate on it, but I just saw it the other day. Saw Powers the other day, so.
Okay. Next question tonight comes from Andy. Does the city still have plans to repaint the lane lines and turn lanes on the roads?
Well, I can say that with reference to the new paving that we're doing, that we're going to, that largely this summer is the Harding Way project, that there'll be new striping, new parking lanes, and those sorts of things. But there's no, be honest with Andy, there's no dedicated program to paint specific lines in specific sections of town. When we resurface, if there's striping there, we'll replace it in kind. So if there's a area particular, one area that I know where the paint has faded are the newer sections of Portland Way, and they just don't make the paint like they used to, and that sounds like a wise Alec comment. It's not. The oil-based paint which had environmental concerns but lasted longer, has been replaced by latex paint, which is not much different in terms of durability than the latex paint you put inside your house. So it doesn't have the longevity, but we don't have a dedicated budget item to systematically repaint crosswalks, center lanes, turn lanes. Maybe we should.
Okay. Next question tonight came from Sheila. Any news when Charles Street will reopen?
Yeah, it's supposed to be the end of the month, but it's if I could go back to the very first days I was mayor, I would dedicate to myself never to hang a date on any project, because it seems like we have difficulty hitting those dates. So they are supposed to be completed by the end of the month. There's still quite a bit of work there, and it's in its best way, it's daily collaboration with the contractor. On the worst days, it's sort of a difference of opinion on what's the best way to finish up this project. So I think everybody prefers when we're collaborating, and I think I really think there's a chance they can be done at the end of the month. But if it's the middle of August, I wouldn't be surprised by that either.
Okay. Next question tonight came from Jeremiah. He asked, is there any update on the dumpsters getting overfilled in the parks?
Yeah, we're about one step away from doing what the county's always done, and that's pull these bags that are sitting on the outside, opening them up and seeing what's on the inside, what letters, what utility bills, what are thrown out. I mean, it's intentional. Now hear this: the dumpsters in the park are for public waste, refuse from the waste can. It is not a substitute for having a garbage man. Stop doing it. And it seems like it's worse in the summer, and I really would likely go into enforcement of people who deposit their garbage, use us as their garbage man, before we resort to renting another box. I mean, there's really no excuse for it. I'll digress for a second. I remember years ago in the 80s when I was county commissioner, and that would happen. Somebody'd show up on Saturday, landfill would be closed, and bleep you, no bleep you. Well, I'll just throw it out on my way home. Sure enough, the bleeper, not the person working for the county, but the person down the bleep, would throw stuff out, Lower Leesville Road, usually not a state route, and it's just especially annoying. So yeah, Jeremiah, that's probably the next step. I think I sound like the president threatening. That's my big bad wolf time, but there's no reason for it. Everybody who does it knows it's wrong, and we'll probably crack down before we resort to putting another dumpster down in the park. Pretty bad, pretty irritating subject. I think while we're on the things irritating some folks in the park, when there's 250 comments on any topic on the social media in Galion, and I think in particular, like when we talk about Galion has 250 comments on anything, that's a pretty large response. It says to me a certain topic struck a nerve over the weekend. I bumped into that as it relates to the same sort of better behavior, but you just choose not to, that I'm complaining about with people dumping their garbage, with the behavior of young adults down at the park. It's just like, everybody who's doing that, who's swearing excessively and loud and calling names out that are, that embarrass anyone who uses them. you know, that kind of behavior is inexcusable, really not going to be tolerated, is best policed by two things. In the chance that the parents or whoever's responsible for the kids hanging out in the park, and I'd sure as heck hope you know that your kid, 14, 15-year-old hanging out at the park, say something to them about not being that kid. You know, it's just not cool, it's not necessary, and us old farts know that that kind of behavior as a young adolescent is not particularly good sign of things to come. So get a handle on that around the house. Say something if they're hanging at the park. Say, you know, I hope you aren't the ones that people are saying are bullying, etc., etc. If the city, through the police department, have to become the parents because the parents won't say anything, then we're going to start to say something. And so if there's a little bit more visibility by GPD, that's probably a good thing. And there's one way to stop that. We don't want the park to be menacing for anyone. But what's going on is there's a handful, maybe 10, 15 kids. Sometimes there's that many. Obviously, sometimes there's less. And they're just being menaces. It reflects bad on everyone. And when you get 200 comments, most of them, yeah, I agree. I don't want my kids exposed to that. Can't somebody do something? Then I think the answer is, I get it. In this respect, I'm really glad you got social media. There's social media, so we can be aware of it and respond to it. So the next thing I'm going to do, last thing on this before I get off this rant, is I'm going to offer every one of those kids a job because they could all have a job. There's a federally funded summer youth program, and when I'm down there and at the new playground, I recognize the kids, and I don't know for sure, but I judge that they're all 14, 15. Because once they have a car, they're going to hang out in the park and menace people. They'll be, I don't know, maybe menacing other drivers. But you know, it really detracts on something that's a real asset for Galion, and we're going to try to get them to cool it, clean it up, or in the off chance that they don't want to sit around and just be inert this summer, we're going to try to offer them a job. So we'll see if they want to try those shoes on. But there's legit jobs, there's plenty of stuff to do, and they pay real money, which is a lot cooler than being a real pain in the neck to little kids in the park. Last thing on this. If you're there, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, whatever, I would not recommend getting in their face. I don't get in their face. I feel kind of squishy or wimpy, hoping that it will somehow go away. It doesn't seem to. But almost everybody's got the phone, and you can very discreetly dial 419-468-9111. Not 911, but 468-911. And just let the dispatcher know, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's you know, if there's an officer that's got a minute, if they could swing through the park, we've got some kids crowding out. You know, they exercise their own right to freedom of speech and all that kind of stuff. I get that part, but they don't have any right to intrude on other people's, and we're going to try to work. We are going to work on it. And so parents, grandparents, whoever's responsible for the kids, if you think your kid's hanging out in the park, if you don't know, you got a problem. If you think they're hanging out in the park, then say something to them. Because people know who you are, people know who they are, and it just reflects poorly on your families and on them. And then, you know, we don't want the police officers acting as the parent or the grandparent or that responsible adult. So please step up to the plate. And finally, as I said just a minute ago, you want a job, we'll be down there. We'll try to offer you a job through the police department. I'm not joking around. So sitting around wondering about why you aren't going to have a car when you're 16, 17 years old. Why don't you earn a couple, $300 a week so you can buy your own darn car in a couple of years. So, all right. That's a grumpy old man, isn't it, Matt? Whew. All right. Now, if everyone hasn't turned off the telephone or the TV or whatever you watch this on. All right. What do we got? What else?
Yep, there are a couple more questions here. We're going to jump back to the Sleep Inn Hotel.
Yeah.
Tina also wanted to know, with the loan that the developer for the hotel had, have they paid any of that off?
Yeah, the city, yes, not a significant amount. I mean, the truth of the matter is they're delinquent on what is the service payment. But I don't want to be critical of them. I think that doesn't solve us any, it doesn't solve the problem. We do have, to answer Tina's question a little bit differently, we do have that debt is secured, so meaning that whoever buys the hotel, and I'm sure it'll sell at some future sale, that debt that's owed the city will go along with that. So there is some leverage, and we've already taken action to try to have our position secured. Having said all of that, the last time this came up, the next day I got a call from the owner. So I'm sure I'm cautious about what I've said tonight, and what our intention is to work with him to find a buyer. That's the best thing for Galion. And I think the sooner that we can get a new operator out there, the better. But I do understand the concern about unpaid utility bills and about unpaid taxes, or what are called service payments in the technical sense. But the service payments are to pay the city back for the infrastructure that was put in. So I hope that answers Tina's question. I want a new hotel. I want the hotel open, and it sounds like a kid before Christmas. I want the hotel open. I want a free center. I want a grocery store, and I want a housing development. And I don't think that's silly or greedy. I think that's the agenda we've got to keep on executing towards. So.
Same topic. Dawn wanted to know what the sale price is listed for the hotel.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a big difference. What is owed on the mortgage, you can find that out in the courthouse. What the filing is, and I don't know. I've been told, and I'm hopeful that there's some buyers from Michigan that would certainly offer less than what's owed on the hotel, but I don't know. If I start acting like I know how to finance hotels and how much one is worth, then people know I'm spinning it out of whole cloth, and I don't. My guess is that cost about $5 to build, and my guess is that it will be resold at a fraction of that cost. Not sure what fraction that'll be. How's that for a politician answer? All right.
Okay. I think the last question I had for tonight came from Kim. She asked for an update on the Westgate North Union intersection. Said an SUV almost hit her today.
Yeah, that's where Union doesn't stop anymore.
Correct.
Yep. The best way, what was the name?
Kim.
Kim, the best way for Kim to get that accomplished is keep pestering me, but she shouldn't have to do that more than once. We have not talked about that, and that's something that the way those are installed or taken down really is a conversation with the service director, the police chief, and our service department. And what I'll do, Kim, is have Matt put that on the list and make sure we talk about that tomorrow. The best I can do. Anything else?
That is all I have for tonight.
Okay, 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, it's been bugging me, the RC called in, and then call in, something, typed in, sent in a message, was asking about masks. And I sort of blew him off, kind of joking around, and never did I imagine that in a 2-week period that that's a potential. And so while we stay tuned like everyone else as to what the governor may propose, I want to acknowledge that whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Okay? If you're cautious about going out, I get it. Don't go out. If you've been wearing a mask in public, keep wearing a mask in public. Because our incidence of new cases is relatively low, almost non-existent. But the measurement that the state is using, the color-coded system, is very sensitive, and 1 or 2 cases or 3 or 4 cases all of a sudden or over the next week or so could cause a spike that the way they're measuring it could cause us to go from yellow to orange. And there are some folks predicting that even counties like ours with a relatively low, in health districts like the city of Guyan with an even lower incidence, could spike up and all of a sudden be a level 3 at-risk county. So stay tuned. RC, I wish I hadn't joked around about it, because it may be sooner than we think. And for the time being, I think let's just keep on doing what we're doing. I think my greatest anxiety is that of a grandparent. I'd hate to be a parent looking at what may happen with the schools, but in the fall. But for the time being, people keep doing what they're doing. We'll stay as one of the cooler spots, the non-hot spots in Ohio, but that mask may be coming. And again, that'll be, I think, largely an individual issue. I don't expect to see massive enforcement at the local level on that. The best way to avoid it for the 4th time is keep doing what you're doing. It seems to be working. And with that, I'll say nothing else.
Nope.
Good night. I appreciate the time and attention. Tune in tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. For Dawn and others interested in the Freeze Center, I hope that gets a good, thorough discussion. It could use 45 minutes or so of different opinions and different ideas, so that we can move ahead together on a plan and also meet other community priorities. So with that, thanks for watching, and good night.